One of my CEO clients runs a nine-figure unicorn in Silicon Valley, and in this video, I'm going to share with you how he structured his days and weeks to manage his time, boost his productivity, and maximize what he gets done. I'll also talk you through some of the mindset shifts that he needed to make to get out of the weeds, manage his workload, and stop thinking like a founder and start operating like a CEO. If you're new here, my name's Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO 2.0, and on my channel, I put out videos on everything from mindset to leadership and becoming more effective in your role. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Now, before you can understand the solution, you firstly need to understand the problem. So I just want to give you some initial context. When him and I first met, despite working 60-plus-hour weeks, he still felt like there were never enough minutes in the day to get everything done. When we broke it down, though, he was over-involved, stuck in the weeds, and wasting his days on tasks that weren't a good use for his time. He was also overwhelmed by competing priorities, not defending his time, and unsure what he should be prioritizing. A big part of the problem is he'd never led a company before, which is why he said to me, "What should I be doing as CEO?" That's why before we could even think about how to schedule his week, we needed to clearly define his role and responsibilities so that he knew where he should be spending his time. To do that, I got him to answer three questions. The first is, what is his zone of genius? The second is, where does his time have the greatest impact? And the third is, what can only be done by him? Once we knew that, we could then audit everything he was taking on, from his to-do list to his meetings, his commitments, and anything else that was taking up his day. What you've got to remember is everything you do as a CEO has a cost. Every hour you spend in one thing is an hour that could have been spent on something else. Not only that, but you also only have so much energy and bandwidth, which is why you're either going to be able to do a few things really well or many things mediocre or badly. That's why by looking at it through the lens of whether or not he should actually be doing this, the goal was to free him up from everything that he didn't need to be involved in. We did that by delegating, deleting, or simply removing it. Just by doing this, he freed up over 10 hours a week, which then allowed us to shift our focus to how to then structure his days to maximize what he gets done. The way I'm going to approach the rest of this video is I'm going to talk you through the different days and how and why we structured them the way that we did. And I'm also going to take you through some of the mindset shifts that he needed to make to stop thinking like a founder and start operating like a CEO. Starting with Mondays, one thing that was working really well for him is on these days he had most of his leadership meetings, meaning he could set his team up with everything they needed for the rest of the week, which would then free him up to focus on everything else. The problem, though, is he'd also go into Mondays with this huge to-do list of what he needed to get done. But because his day was so crammed with back-to-back meetings, he'd never get to any of it. Then at the end of the day, he'd always beat himself up because he felt like he should be doing more, even though there was no time left in the day. His issue was he was judging his productivity over the course of a day rather than a week. And what I explained to him is that not every day is going to move things forward. As with so many competing responsibilities, there will be times where other commitments need to take priority or simply need to get done. This is why I advised him that every CEO needs two types of days: effective days and efficient days. Effective days are where you get your high value work done, you further your vision, drive growth, and move forward what you need to do. Efficient days may be more operational. You attend meetings, do one-to-ones, knock things off the to-do list, and complete tasks that keep the business in order. Yes, you can have a mixture of both in a single day, but I find that often CEOs who are overwhelmed are generally stuck in a cycle where too many days are efficient and merely focused on getting stuff done without enough prioritization on being effective. The reason this happens is they get stuck focusing on what's important in the short term or on that day without factoring in the bigger picture and where they're headed. This is why for this client, by viewing Mondays as efficient days where his focus was on setting his team up for success, it took a huge amount of pressure off of him and he was able to start balancing all of his different commitments. And when we get to talking about Fridays, I'll also share with you one process we implemented that transformed what he was able to get out of his teams and his weekly meetings. So Mondays were largely taken up with back-to-back meetings and operational issues. As for the rest of the week, the way he generally approach his time is he create a to-do list and tackle whatever was important. Which makes sense, because if you want to get things done, why wouldn't you make a list of what needs your attention? Well, while practices like this may work for the average person, they can be catastrophic for CEOs. The reason being is they're short sighted and built around what's important that day without factoring in what's important long term. And this is why it often struggled to find the time for things that actually move the business forward, or even if he did, he'd often be out of energy and bandwidth to execute on them at the level they needed. This is why, to balance his bigger picture priorities with everyday tasks, we rebuilt his schedule around his top level work. Now, this is what we figured out at the start when defining his zone of genius, where his time has the greatest impact and what can only be done by him. He also took some time to figure out their 90-day goals and targets, and by using those insights, we determined he needed 12 hours every single week to focus on these tasks. Also, the time of the day he operated at his best was first thing in the morning. This is when he was energized and focused, and it was also the time of the day he was least likely to be distracted or pulled into firefighting. Knowing all that, we blocked off his mornings from 8 a.m. until 11 Tuesday to Friday to only focus on these tasks. This meant he'd have enough time in the morning to spend 30 minutes before his workday to look ahead at what was coming up. That way he could remove himself from anything he shouldn't be doing, he could delegate tasks to his team, and get clear on what he needed to get done. Once he'd done his planning, he'd then do his high-value work until 11, after which he'd take some time to catch up on email and messages. He'd then have some lunch, and only after that would he dive into his to-do list and everything else that needed his attention. Then, depending on the days, his afternoons may also have some one-to-ones or other meetings that needed his involvement. The big shift mindset-wise, though, was he started doing these at a time that worked best for him, not other people. This was really difficult for him at first, as he had these people-pleasing tendencies where he wanted to make everyone else happy. What I explained to him, though, was him prioritizing his workload didn't make him selfish or that he had a big ego. Instead, it was him doing what was best for the company. Recognizing this made it a lot easier for him to be at peace with putting his priorities first. Then beyond that, to help him keep on top of everyday tasks, we also blocked off 5 until 6 p.m. every day to focus on wrapping up. Again, he'd deal with emails and messages and other tasks that needed his attention. By adding this in as a non-negotiable, he was able to get out of the cycle of falling behind on these everyday tasks that inevitably meant he'd often have to work late to try and catch up. With all of this in place, this is what an average week mapped out looked like, which was a night and day difference from how he used to have no structure and everything just crammed in. One thing you may notice, though, is he's also waking up and starting his days at different times. The reason we did this is from an energy management standpoint. The routine we developed needed to be built around longevity to avoid him burning out. Because what a lot of people do is they try and have the same routine every day. They get up at the same time and they do the same things. And while that's better than nothing, it's far from optimal. And in my book, The Effective CEO 2.0, I talk through a better approach. The example I use in the book is there was a CEO I was working with who came to me absolutely crushing Monday and Tuesday. He was energized and focused and getting through all of his work. Come Wednesday, though, his focus was starting to dwindle. He was getting less done. By Thursday, it was even worse. And Friday was pretty much a complete write-off. He'd then recharge and do it all over again. So essentially, he was basically having 2 productive days a week. When I started looking at the way he was approaching it, what I found is he was going full steam ahead on Monday and Tuesday to the point there was no gas left in the tank for the rest of the week. So what I advised him to do was implement what I call push and pull days. A push day is when you go all out, you take on higher bandwidth tasks and you push yourself further. A pull day is when you pull back. You take on lower bandwidth responsibilities, you take more time to rest and recover, and you allow yourself to recharge. So for that client at the time, the way that I recommended him approaching it was taking Monday and Tuesday as a push day, then on Wednesdays pulling back. He'd sleep in, take on less meetings, finish early, go to the gym, get a massage or whatever he wanted to do for his self-care. And when I first recommended this, he was really against the idea. He was saying to me, I can't do that. I need to be doing more. He felt guilty at just the thought of taking some time off. And I said to him, Try it and let's see what happens. What he found was that by slowing down and recharging on a Wednesday, it then boosted his energy to the point that he could come back with the same level of focus for Thursday and Friday that he had on Monday and Tuesday, essentially taking him from 2 highly productive days a week to 4. And this is why, like I said, from an energy management standpoint, it's far more optimal to look at how you perform over the course of a week rather than just a single day. Now, going back to the CEO we're talking about in this video, as part of his routine, he was hitting the gym Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Because of that, we treated those days as push days where he'd get up early so he could get his workout in. Then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he'd allow himself to pull back and get some extra rest. This change also made it easier for him to schedule date night with his wife on a Wednesday, as it meant he didn't need to rush it as he was getting up at 6:30 instead of 5 a.m. We also made sure when structuring his days that he didn't take any meetings on a Wednesday afternoon. That allowed him to ensure that things didn't overrun and he wasn't exposed to any stressful conversations or situations that would prevent him from being present with his wife. Prior to putting the structure in place, this had been a huge challenge for him, and he really wanted to make sure that he was prioritizing finding harmony with his business and other areas of his life. That's why by being intentional with this, we could figure out a plan to get it under control. From there, shifting the focus to Fridays, again, he did his top level work and then he used the afternoons to revisit their goals, monitor their progress, and strategize. This time is key, is what so many first time CEOs struggle with, is getting comfortable with slowing down and stepping back. The reason being is they get so used to the hustle and grind that anything that isn't ticking stuff off or moving things forward feels like they aren't working. The guilt from that alone is often why they get stuck in the weeds or they dive into things that they shouldn't. The thing is though, as CEOs, stepping back and slowing down is often where your time has the greatest impact, as it allows you to think, process problems, and figure out how to deal with challenges. This is why for him, if anything, this is the most impactful time of his week. To make that time even more effective, I also got him to implement a weekly report that his team needed to fill in and submit by lunchtime. The report has 6 questions on it. What happened over the last 7 days? What challenges did we have? What isn't working? What does his CEO name need to be aware of? What help and support do we need? And then what is our focus over the next 7 days? The benefit of getting all of this information is he's then able to see at a macro level exactly what's going on in every area of the company. He can then use those insights to properly plan for the Monday meetings to make sure he's asking the right questions, giving feedback and supporting his team on exactly what they need to do. It also means he can anticipate problems because he can see issues for what they are. So rather than being pulled in a few weeks down the line when there's this huge issue, he can step in as and when needed to make sure that he's guiding and coaching and supporting his team on the challenges they're facing. Then finally, moving to Sundays, he takes an hour to plan his week. I mentioned earlier about auditing his commitments and meetings, and that's why he starts by going through his calendar and to-do list to figure out what he shouldn't be doing. Again, this is all about freeing him up to focus on what truly matters. He then looks at their goals and objectives and what they're trying to achieve, and he goes through the week ahead to get a better idea of what's coming up. From there, he'd figure out his priorities, schedule time for his key tasks, and prepare for any meetings. This structure and approach is what took him from working 60-plus-hour weeks and barely having the time to do the things that actually mattered to be able to prioritize and move forward the key things that needed to get done. It also meant that rather than going into the week feeling anxious and overwhelmed by everything he needed to do, he felt calm and in control because he knew exactly what he needed to focus on. The reason all of this worked, though, was because we took a highly intentional approach where we figured out the best structure that would help him maximize his focus, time, and energy. This is going to be different for everyone, so you really need to figure out your own priorities, energy levels, commitments, and how you operate at your best. With that being said, though, having the perfect schedule alone is not enough, and I see so many people constantly searching for the latest productivity strategies and hacks. The reason they don't work, though, is they haven't fixed the biggest problems in their business. Because at the end of the day, the perfect plan is meaningless if you're easily distracted, constantly pulled into fires, or not letting go of tasks you shouldn't be doing. That's why, to help the CEO get this under control, we had to work on mindset shifts in everything from him setting boundaries to defending his time, getting his team to solve their own problems, and keeping them accountable for the things they needed to do. Because once you get that right, that's how you can stop working in the business and spend more time working on what actually drives growth. So there you have it. That's how to structure your week like a nine-figure CEO. On my channel, I have a ton of videos that go into everything from delegation to letting go, keeping people accountable, and the mindset behind defending your time. So make sure you check them out. And if you want to dive into any of this further, then in the description below, you can also get a copy of my book, The Effective CEO 2.0, where I'm going to show you everything that I covered in this video and more to show you how to become the leader your business needs to take it to the next level of success. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. I've been Byron Morrison. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.